welcome to the Hillbilly Kitchen. Today we're going to be making chicken pot pie. Now this is a really detailed and long recipe. It has a lot of steps, but you can shorten those steps. There is a cost for shortening the steps, and of course it changes the taste and the quality. Now according to Brett, this is the best thing he has ever eaten. And if you know Brett, you know that is a significant statement. So to make it completely from scratch, you're going to need 2 to 3 pie crusts. We have a recipe up for this butter crust, and I will put a link in the description of the recipe to this pie crust recipe. You can also make it in one large pan. Now if you just make it in a pie pan, it's going to make it easier. If you buy a pie crust, it's going to make it easier. I'm using a large muffin pan. If you're making it for children, you might want to use a small muffin pan, and you can even buy the little foil pie pans, individual ones that are disposable. That would make it faster. These muffin pans are kind of hard to deal with, but that's what I had, so that's what I'm using. And you can do that when you're cooking anything, you know, just find a pan and bake it. Also, you can use frozen or canned vegetables. Now, I cut up all my vegetables except for my peas. They were frozen. But you can just use frozen or canned mixed vegetables. If you use canned vegetables, you want to make sure you drain them. But you're going to need a cup of peas, a little over a cup of carrots, and about 1.5 cups of potatoes. Now you're also going to need some chicken and some chicken broth. You need about 2 cups of cubed up chicken and about 2 cups of chicken broth. And we just did a video on how to cook chicken so that you get chicken broth. I'm also going to put a link to that video in the description so you can make your own chicken and chicken broth for this. But you could use canned chicken and canned chicken broth if you wanted to. Now that's going to seriously change the flavor, and it's also going to change the way that you season it. You're not going to add probably hardly any salt if you use canned broth. And to season it, you need salt, pepper, onion powder, and some celery seeds. I use about 1/2 teaspoon of celery seeds, about 1 tablespoon of onion powder. And because I made this broth, it's not canned, I'm going to use about 1/2 teaspoon of salt because I have to have enough salt for all these vegetables, and even a little extra for the chicken. Pepper is just a taste, and we are going to be able to taste it before we actually bake it. Because what we're going to do is we're going to put our filling in a pot and put it on the stove and heat it until it just starts to boil a little bit. Now the other thing you need is about 2 tablespoons of flour. That's going to thicken it a little bit. It's not going to thicken it as much as like gravy or something, but you're going to get more flour out of your pie crust. So I wanted to kind of show you how to handle this pie crust just a little bit, but like I said, I'm going to put a link to the pie crust in the description. If you're using something like these muffin pans, there's not really any great way to do it. You just have to kind of take a piece of your crust and push it down in the muffin pan and then squish it out toward the sides a little bit. Make sure you get it all covered. If it tears, you can take another piece and patch it. That's not a big deal. I always have to patch, well, pretty much all of them, because the pie crust just doesn't want to fit this shape. It's so deep and it's so skinny. It's not a real wide pan, so the crust doesn't want to go into it easily. You do want to make sure you come up above the top of your pan, and if you're doing this in a regular pie pan, just watch that video on how to do a crust. You want to come all the way out to the edge of your pan, and that makes it really easy to seal your top crust to your bottom, because we are going to top these. And you can see here I have another pie crust all rolled out, and I'm just going to lay it over top of all these at once, and we'll do that here in just a minute. But that's, you know, basically all there is to do in the crust. And like I said, there is no good way to get it in the muffin pans. If you're making them for little kids though, this recipe will do about 12 small muffins, and it'll do about 6 of these big ones. You might have a little bit left over, but it'll definitely fill 6 big muffin cups. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna dump all this stuff in our pot here. Our chicken broth. Mine has a little extra butter in it there because, like I said, I did make this. And we're going to put in our 2 tablespoons of flour. And we'll go ahead and put in our spices. And at least a tablespoon of onion powder. You can put more if you like, and you can dice up onions and put diced up onions in here for extra flavor. But this is going to overfill a regular pie shell, and it's going to overfill these muffin pans. So you have to kind of keep in mind that you have a limited amount of space when you're making this, so you can only add so many vegetables. I mean, you could chop up celery instead of using the celery seeds too, but they take up a lot more room. Like I said, about a half a teaspoon of celery seeds is all I use, and you can adjust that to suit your taste. If your broth is hot because you just made it, you do want to dissolve your flour in a little bit of cold water, because if you put your flour in hot chicken broth, it will make lumps and you won't be able to get them out. Like I said, I'm going to use about half a teaspoon of salt. You will adjust that based on what kind of broth you're using and how much salt you put in your broth. And I probably use about a quarter teaspoon of pepper. I like pepper. Again, you can adjust it, and we will be able to taste it before we actually bake it. And then just dump your vegetables in. And you can see the onion powder and the flour are both still a little bit lumpy in here, but that's okay. They'll dissolve when we start to heat this. My chicken broth was really, really cold because I made it ahead of time. There's not many lumps left. And you do want to chunk your chicken, and it's going to bust up a little bit more because we're going to stir it a time or two before we actually put it in the muffin pan. And then we just want to take this over to the stove, and like I said, we're going to heat it until it starts to boil. Now, you do want to heat it with a lid on it because it heats faster, and you don't want all of your broth to evaporate. And after it comes to a boil, it's going to look like this. And see, our chicken does bust up. This is busted up quite a bit. I wish it was a little bit chunkier, but it's still good. And that's all you do right there. You just bring it to a boil. You'll stir it a time or two, not much. Keep an eye on it. You don't want it to stick. And you don't want it to bubble out for sure. I mean, if it gets to that big of a boil, it's just going to make a mess. You just want to bring it to a boil. It thickens a little bit. You can see that juice is thickened just a little bit, but not too much. Because like I said, it is going to get more flour out of the crust. And your gravy is going to be a little thicker when it's done. And now all you're going to do, if you were doing one big pie, you would just dump this all in. But here we're going to fill up our muffin cups one at a time. And like I said, this is much easier in a big pie because you have that nice lip on your pie pan. And you can seal it really easily in a big pie pan. But this is how Brett likes his, so this is how I make his. If you had little individual tart pans too, you could actually make this in those. They would be good for making this. And you want to fill them all the way up. Same thing with your pie shell if you're doing a pie. Now I try to fill them to the top with the gravy, but not have it spilling all over the muffin pan because it'll make a mess. If you're doing the one big pie again, you don't really have to worry about that because you've got that wide lip on it. Just watch here and try to get each muffin cup so that the gravy is right to the edge but not spilling out. You do want to taste this before you start filling up your muffin pans, and I did that already, because at this point, if it tastes like it needs a little more salt or a little more pepper or a little more of the celery seeds, you can add it. Of course, once it's baked, even adding salt's not going to be great. You want to get that salt in it now. So you do want to taste it, and if it needs a little more spice in it, just add it. Okay, that's about all I can get in this. And you can see I do have a little bit left, and that's okay. That would probably all fit in the 12 small muffins, and it would all fit in a full-size pie shell too. But I'm going to have a little bit left, and I'm not going to try to put it in there because I don't want to make a mess. Now, if you were doing this, like I said, in a big pie shell, you would just top it and then press the edges. It's a little more difficult in these muffin pans, but it's easier to do it with one large piece than it is to try and do it with 6 individual pieces. And that's also true if you're doing the small muffin cups. So kind of top the whole thing and then cut it apart and just sort of shape it so that it fits each of the cups. And you can trim off a little bit of the extra. You want to try to seal them up as much as you can. It's not really possible to seal them perfect, and that's what I was talking about, the mess you make if you get too much gravy. It just squirts out the edge like that one right there did. But just work with it a little bit, and you can get it sort of sealed. Because your pie filling is warm, it kind of tends to seal itself when you put the top on it, which is nice. And I'm not sure it would even be possible to do these if the filling wasn't warm. I mean, it would just be almost impossible. If you're doing it in muffin cups, you do want to grease your pan too. That helps them come out, because you're going to have to kind of dump this out. Oops, I got a little bit there that's not covered. I'm just going to take this piece here and sit it over here. And it's fine to do that. Just kind of patch it if you have something that's not covered good. Like I said, because this filling is warm, it'll kind of stick the crust together. And this whole process is much easier in a large pie shell, obviously, because you're only doing one pie, not 6. While you're doing this, you want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And we are going to put these in the oven for 35 minutes or so. It might take a little longer if you are doing a big pie, and likewise if you're doing the little muffin cups or individual tins, it'll cook a little bit faster. But these take about 35 minutes to cook. A big pie maybe as much as 45 minutes. Individual ones or smaller ones, you want to check on those at about 30 minutes. Okay, the last thing you want to do is we have to cut the top of these. And we'll carry it over here to the stove to do that. Okay, like I said, it is important to cut the top of it. You just want to cut a little X in the top to vent it. And you also want to do this not just to vent it, but you can tell when it's done. It'll be golden brown and your filling will be bubbling out through this X that we're cutting in here. If you're doing a big pie, you want to cut an X in the center and then cut 4 or 5 X's at least around the outer edge of it. So that's all there is to preparing it. And we're going to put it in the 350-degree oven, like I said, for about 35 minutes. In 35 minutes, when we come back to the oven, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see a little bit of filling maybe coming out the top where you marked your X. And of course I have some running around my pipe or my muffin pan here, which happens with muffin pans. You won't have that if you do one big pie, because it of course will have the lip and you'll have your pie crust sealed all around it. Okay, you want to serve these as soon as you can after they come out of the oven, because they are best when they are very, very hot. If you do it in a large pie pan, you'll just cut it and scoop it out, or just scoop it out. It's not really going to come out like a pie that has set up like maybe a lemon meringue pie or something. It's going to be like a really, really hot apple pie where the filling kind of runs everywhere. That's why Brett likes these, because all of his filling stays inside. Now to get these out of here and serve them, you're just going to take a knife and you're going to go around each one and loosen it up a little bit, and then you're going to dump them out. And the law of muffin pan chicken pot pies is at least one of them, usually 2 of them, breaks when you flip them out. So I'm going to try it right here on the counter and we're going to see what we get. None of them broke. How about that? Ooch, that one's leaking. Oh, that one broke a little bit. But that's all there is to it. The pan is a mess. Let it soak to wash it. And you serve them just like this. Just set them on a plate. It's a complete meal in a cute little muffin cup. But if you're doing it in a big pie shell, like I said, it's much easier, a lot less work, a lot less prep time, because you're only dealing with that one pie crust. Give this a try. Even if you take some of the shortcuts and use chicken that's already prepared, or use the canned vegetables, or use a pie crust that you bought, it's still going to be delicious. But let me know what you think, and at least once try it completely from scratch, because it is truly delicious when you make it all from scratch with fresh vegetables or frozen. Or I couldn't get fresh peas this time of year, but the frozen peas are great in it. I really don't think there's much of a difference in the taste of the frozen peas and fresh peas. But we appreciate y'all joining us in the Hillbilly Kitchen. Don't forget to click like and subscribe before you leave so you don't miss any of our videos. And until next time, remember to put God first.